All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today it's Dialog Group Berhan. We've got their 2024 annual report and hot off the press, their Q1 FY2025 interim report. Get ready for the inside scoop on this Malaysian company, making a global impact in the energy world.
You know, it's fascinating how quietly Dialog has become this global powerhouse, providing all sorts of technical services. And they're not just sticking to traditional oil and gas, they're making serious moves in sustainable and renewable energy as well.
Okay, so to get a handle on what Dialog actually does, let's break down the energy sector for a sec. I gotta admit, sometimes all those different stages can get a little confusing. We've got upstream, like the initial hunt for oil and gas, extracting it from the earth. Then there's midstream, all about moving and storing that energy. And finally, downstream, where it gets refined and processed.
That's a perfect way to picture it. Dialog is active in all three. That's one of their strengths, a diversification. Their midstream business, especially those terminals at Langsat and Pengerang, brings in a pretty steady revenue stream. No matter what's happening with oil and gas prices, they're still making money.
Right, because even if prices drop, they're still getting paid to store and move the product. Smart. But let's talk money. What's the story in their 2024 annual report?
Well, FY 2024 was a pretty fantastic year for them. Revenue went up 5% to RM3.15 billion. But hold on, their net profit, that jumped by a whopping 16.3% to hit RM605.4 million.
Wow, that's a huge jump. I'm betting their upstream activities had something to do with that.
You bet. Especially those Malaysian upstream operations, they were on fire. But it wasn't just finding more oil and gas, though. Their strategic investments in both Langsat and Pengerang, those terminals really paid off.
So they've got this solid foundation with their midstream operations, steady income, and then in 2024, boom, upstream success sends profits through the roof.
Precisely. Now, Q1 of FY 2025, things get a bit more interesting.
Ooh, intriguing. What's happening in the most recent quarter?
Their net profit after tax is still climbing, hit RM 148.6 million. That's a 4.5% increase year over year. But here's the thing. This growth happened even with a dip in overall revenue.
Wait, how's profit going up when revenue's going down? Doesn't sound sustainable to me.
Well, gotta remember how diverse their business is. Revenue from their Malaysian operations was lower this quarter, sure. But their joint ventures and associates, those performed incredibly well, and that offset the dip.
So even though one part of the business slowed down, their partnerships basically carried them through. That diversification is seriously powerful stuff. Are there any areas where they're hitting some roadblocks, though?
There are. Their downstream business, specifically their engineering, procurement, construction, and commissioning, those EPCC projects, they reported some losses. Seems to be a result of the global economic climate, to be honest.
What kind of global factors are we talking about that are messing with their downstream projects?
It's kind of a perfect storm, really. Geopolitical tensions, inflation running rampant, and then you've got supply chain issues on top of that. A lot of companies are dealing with this right now. Dialog's no exception.
It really highlights how even a successful company, diversified and all, can get knocked around by global events. Okay, so we've got a grip on their financials. But it's not all about numbers, right? What about their approach to sustainability? What are they doing on that front?
Dialog seems to be taking sustainability pretty seriously. Their goal is to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050.
2050 is a popular target for net zero. Are they taking any actual steps now to get there?
Oh, absolutely. One big thing they're doing is expanding their terminal operations to store sustainable and renewable fuels. July 2024, they announced a pretty big expansion, adding a whopping 150,000 cubic meters of capacity at their Langsat 3 terminal, all dedicated to renewable fuel storage.
So not just talking about sustainability, they're actually building the stuff needed for a lower carbon energy sector. What about transparency? How open are they about their sustainability efforts?
They're working on aligning their disclosures with the task force on climate-related financial disclosures framework, TCFD, aiming for fully aligned disclosures by FY 2026. It's all about making it clear to investors and stakeholders how they're managing climate-related risks and opportunities.
Makes sense. Investors want to know that the companies they're backing are thinking long-term about climate change. So we've got the infrastructure for renewable energy storage, transparency about climate risks. What other initiatives are they pursuing?
They're investing in the circular economy. They've got Dialog DU PCR SDN BHD, a facility that produces food-grade recycled PET pellets, basically taking plastic bottles and turning them back into something useful.
That's clever. It's like they're tackling sustainability from all angles. Renewables, transparency, even going after plastic waste. But it's not all about these huge global initiatives, right? What
Yeah.
about what they're doing locally?
You're right. They're definitely engaged on a local level as well. This recently, they had this river cleanup and plastic upcycling workshop with Fusikatir and Maikasi Foundation.
So they're getting their hands dirty, literally getting their employees out there doing community projects. I always like it when companies walk the walk, not just talk the talk. Anything else they're up to locally?
They've got this seagrass conservation program partnered with Reef Check Malaysia, Maikasi again, and University Malaya. Their employees actually participate in monthly monitoring sessions, really getting involved with the local ecosystem.
It's great to see those employees taking part. Shows they're on board with this stuff.
And when Pengerang Johor got hit with those floods, Dialog stepped up to help families affected, provided a RM500 allowance through Maikasi so people could buy food and replace essentials.
That's real, tangible support when it's needed most. Okay, we've talked financials, sustainability. What's next on the deep dive agenda?
Let's shift gears a bit. Time to talk about Dialog's most valuable asset, their people.
A company's only as good as its employees, right? What are they doing to make sure that those employees are well taken care of and able to develop?
Well, it seems like they're putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to employee well-being. They've got a bunch of programs in place to promote health, safety, and just general well-being in the workplace.
That's great to hear. What kind of things are they actually doing? Give me some specifics.
For one thing, they're big on safety. They hold these regular emergency response preparedness drills, ERP drills, making sure everyone knows what to do in case of an emergency.
I hope they're not springing those drills on people out of the blue. But hey, it's good to know they're serious about workplace safety.
They also seem to get that ongoing training is important. They've got these health awareness e-learning modules, cover things like hearing conservation, personal protective equipment, all online, so employees can do it whenever it works for them.
That kind of flexibility is key, especially for folks working different shifts or juggling other stuff. What about mental health? Is that on their radar?
Absolutely. July 2021, they launched a Global Employee Assistance Program, that's the EAP. And then in August 2023, they added this online resource page, ORPE. It's a platform with all sorts of resources, and employees can even connect with qualified clinical psychologists and counselors if they need to.
It's fantastic they're recognizing how important mental health is. So physical safety covered with the drills, continuous learning with e-learning, and mental health support through the EAP and ORPE sounds pretty well-rounded to me.
Yeah, they're really covering all the bases. Now let's switch gears again, dive into their corporate governance.
All right, so from employee well-being to the framework that guides how they operate as a company, how's Dialog approaching corporate governance? Are they transparent and accountable?
From what I see in these reports, they seem pretty committed to strong corporate governance. They follow the Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance, which sets high standards for transparency and accountability.
So they're playing by the rules. But are they just doing the bare minimum or going above and beyond?
Oh, they're going further. For example, they implemented this comprehensive anti-bribery and corruption policy, their ABC policy, back in 2019. It's in line with Malaysia's Anti-Corruption Commission's Section 17A. Shows they're serious about maintaining a culture of integrity.
That's good to hear. And these days, with all the data breaches and cyber attacks, cybersecurity is huge. Are they addressing that as part of their corporate governance?
Definitely. They've got a robust cyber resilience framework. Covers risk management, data protection, asset management, business continuity, access control, and training, basically covering all the angles.
They're not just thinking about financial risks. They're on top of those technology and data security risks as well.
Right, and that focus on ethical conduct, it goes all the way down their supply chain. They require their partners to follow their code of business ethics and that ABC policy too.
Important to make sure your commitment to ethics goes beyond just your own company walls. So transparency, accountability, ethical behavior throughout their operations, they seem to be checking all the corporate governance boxes.
Exactly. They're building a strong foundation of trust, that's for sure.
You know what I love about digging through these annual reports? It's not just about the dry financials and policies. You often find these little nuggets that reveal a company's personality.
You mean those little details that show how they're involved in their communities, supporting things that align with their values?
Exactly. And Dialog's reports. They got some great examples.
Their sponsorship of the U13 National Rugby Championship at SK Bukit Lunjan really impressed me. There were 22 girls teams and 24 boys teams from 6 states. That's some serious commitment to youth sports.
Yeah, it's not your typical corporate sponsorship, is it? I love that they're supporting something a little different, promoting teamwork and healthy competition. What else caught your eye?
Their support for that Iran Asli student robotics team from SK Permatang Keladang really stood out. Those kids made it all the way to the semifinals of the MakeX International Robotics Competition in China.
Wow, that's amazing. It's really inspiring to see them backing STEM education, especially in marginalized communities.
And to boost environmental awareness and sustainable food production, they've been providing aquaponic edible gardens to their adopted schools.
It's great they're connecting with young people in a hands-on way like that. Not just writing checks, but actively getting involved with enriching the lives of these students.
These are just a few examples of how Dialog is engaging with its community, going above and beyond just the bottom line.
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. Dialog's impressive financial performance, their dedication to sustainability, their approach to employee well-being, and corporate governance. And we've even found some inspiring stories about their community involvement. But there's still a lot more to discover. Join us for part 2, where we'll go even deeper into Dialog's operations and strategic initiatives.
Always more to learn. See you in part 2. You know, when we were talking about Dialog's sustainability push earlier, I was thinking about the challenges they might face as they try to shift to a lower carbon future.
That's a good point. They've obviously got a strong base in that traditional energy world. But how does that experience actually translate to renewables? What kind of unique hurdles might they run into?
Well, one thing is the regulations for renewables. They're always changing. Policies and incentives can shift pretty quickly, which makes long-term planning tricky.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as just throwing up a new terminal. They've got to be ready to adapt to those shifting regulations and market conditions.
Exactly. And they'll need to build up some new skills and expertise. Their experience with engineering and project management, that'll be valuable, of course. But renewable energy technologies, those require a whole different set of knowledge.
So investing in training their current workforce
Yeah.
and maybe bringing in some fresh talent with specialized knowledge.
Yeah.
Solar, wind, hydrogen, that kind of thing.
Right. And then there's the whole competition thing. The renewable energy sector is a hotbed right now. Tons of new players, including those big tech giants and startups with their innovative ways of doing things.
So it's not just the traditional oil and gas companies they're up against anymore, a whole new playing field.
Precisely. And public perception can be a challenge. Dialogue's making progress on sustainability, sure, but they'll need to be really good at communicating what they're doing and address any doubts about how committed they really are to a low-carbon future.
It's a reminder that sustainability isn't just about technology and investments. It's about trust and credibility. Being transparent, showing real action, that's what builds confidence.
Totally agree. Now, while we're on the topic of this transition, it's interesting how much they emphasize long-term recurring income.
That caught my attention too. Why is that such a big deal, especially with their shift towards renewables?
Well, it shows they're not just after those quick wins. They're building a business model that can weather those market storms, support long-term investments.
So even as the energy world changes around them, they're aiming for stability, predictability in those revenue streams. How does that actually look in practice?
Their midstream business is a perfect example. Those terminals, they generate a steady income flow, storage fees, and tariffs. That consistent revenue, it helps them ride out the ups and downs of the energy market and gives them the cash to invest in new tech and initiatives.
It's like having a solid anchor in rough seas gives them stability to navigate this transition to a low-carbon world.
Exactly. And it's not just about the money. This long-term thinking, it seems to influence how they approach talent development. I noticed they're really pushing for employees to get diverse experiences both here and overseas.
What's the thinking behind that?
Well, they're sending people on assignments to different countries, even seconding them to their joint venture partners. It's all about exposing their workforce to different cultures, different ways of doing business, and of course, new technologies.
So they're not just training people for their current role. They're prepping them for a future where adaptability and global perspectives will be even more valuable.
Exactly. Smart strategy for building a future-ready team. And speaking of the future, we can't ignore technology's role in all of this.
Totally. Technology is shaking things up in every industry. Energy's no exception. How is Dialog using technology to make their operations better, to drive innovation?
They're going all in on digitalization across the board, using tech to streamline processes, improve decision-making, boost efficiency. They've even developed their own tech, like that cashless payment system used by Mikasi for their welfare programs.
That's pretty cool. So they're not just using tech to boost their own bottom line, but to have a positive impact on society too. Technology can be a powerful force for good when used the right way.
Absolutely. And it's not just about adopting the latest shiny tech. They're cultivating this culture of innovation within the company.
How are they doing that? What are they actually doing?
Things like their Young Engineer program, giving young engineers a chance to develop their skills, explore new ideas. They're encouraging collaboration across different departments, bringing together folks with different expertise and ways of thinking.
Smart move. Breaking down those silos, bringing diverse viewpoints to the table, that's where creative solutions are born. Sounds like they're building an environment where innovation can thrive.
Yeah, and they're not scared to experiment, take some risks. They get that sometimes you have to fail to truly innovate. Creating a culture where people feel comfortable trying new things, even if it doesn't always work out perfectly.
Absolutely crucial. Punish people for failing, and you kill creativity. You need to create that space where people feel safe to take risks, to learn from those mistakes.
Exactly. They celebrate their successes too, sharing best practices and lessons learned. It's all about that continuous improvement mindset.
Great way to show that innovation is important and create that positive feedback loop. Innovation becomes part of their DNA, not just something that happens in a lab somewhere.
Now, while we're talking about managing things, I wanted to bring up their risk management approach.
Makes sense. The energy sector, it's inherently risky. How are they making sure they're ready for the unexpected?
Well, they've got this very well-defined risk management policy and framework, follows international standards. They've even got a whole group risk management department working directly with all their business units.
So risk management is a core part of their operations, not just an afterthought. What specific risks are they focused on?
They're taking a holistic approach, looking at financial risks, operational risks, environmental, social, the whole spectrum. They're even considering cybersecurity a major concern.
It's a reminder that risk management isn't just about preventing accidents or losing money. It's about protecting their reputation, relationships, and ensuring they can keep going strong for the long haul.
Right on. They're using all sorts of tools and techniques to identify, assess, and mitigate risks. Risk registers, key risk indicators, early warning systems. They do regular risk assessments and reviews, trying to stay one step ahead.
So they're proactive, trying to catch potential problems before they blow up into big crises. And they've got plans in place if things do go wrong.
Oh, absolutely. Business continuity plans, disaster recovery plans, the works. They seem pretty well prepared for a wide range of potential disruptions.
It's reassuring to see how seriously they take risk management. It's essential for any company that wants to succeed in the long run, especially in the energy sector.
Absolutely. Now let's shift our focus to how Dialog interacts with all their stakeholders.
Okay, so we're moving from managing those internal risks to managing those external relationships. Who are their key stakeholders and how are they working with them?
You've got your shareholders, customers, employees, suppliers, local communities, government regulators, the whole lot. They seem to get that building strong relationships with these groups is vital for their success down the line.
It's about more than just profits, right? It's about trust and building goodwill with everyone affected by what they do. How are they putting that into practice?
They use all sorts of ways to engage with stakeholders, regular meetings, site visits, briefings, community programs, you name it. And they're actively looking for feedback, wanting to hear what these groups have to say.
So it's a two-way street. They're listening to their stakeholders, using their perspectives when they're making decisions. How are they ensuring transparency in all this back and forth?
Well, they put a lot of information about their operations and initiatives right on their website. Detailed reports on their corporate governance, their sustainability efforts, their financials, it's all there.
That's great. Transparency is all about building trust. And they've got that investor relations team ready to answer any questions investors might have.
Right. They're staying ahead of the game, keeping investors in the loop. But it's not just about those financial folks. Remember those community engagement programs we talked about? That's proof they're committed to being a good neighbor, a responsible corporate citizen.
Absolutely. Working with organizations like my CASI, implementing programs that actually address local needs, and encouraging employees to get involved, give back to the community.
It's like they understand that their success is directly tied to the well-being of the communities around them. Everybody wins.
It's impressive how they're managing all those different relationships, balancing the needs of shareholders with those of their employees, their customers, suppliers, the communities. It's a tricky balancing act, but they seem to be pulling it off.
Now, speaking of balancing, remember their diversification strategy. Let's dig a bit deeper into how that's playing out across their different business areas.
All right, so we know they're an upstream, midstream, downstream. But what are the real advantages of being spread out like that.
It gives them resilience. The energy industry is a roller coaster, you know? Oil prices go up, they go down, demand for different products fluctuates.
So by being in all three segments, they're less vulnerable to those swings in any one part of the market. One area might be struggling, but another can pick up the slack.
Exactly. And it's not just about surviving those cycles, it also gives them this broader view of the whole energy industry. They can see trends emerging across the entire value chain, make smarter strategic decisions.
It's like having that 360-degree vision instead of just looking through a keyhole helps them be more adaptable, more agile when things change.
Right, and it's not just about different parts of the energy sector. They're geographically diverse too, operating in multiple countries across Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Australasia.
Spreading the risk geographically and across business segments. Double protection against market volatility.
Exactly. And on top of that, remember, their focus on long-term recurring income provides a really stable base no matter what those short-term fluctuations are doing.
It's like building a solid investment portfolio. Different assets to weather different economic conditions. Okay, so we've covered diversification in terms of business segments and geography. What about their energy sources? How are they incorporating sustainable and renewable energy into the mix?
They've made it clear that transitioning to a low-carbon future is a priority. Expanding their terminals to store those sustainable fuels, SF, biofuels, exploring hydrogen, investing in carbon capture and storage. They're doing a lot.
Sounds like they're not betting on just one horse. They're exploring their options, hedging their bets as the energy world transforms.
Precisely. And they're not just doing this because it's the end thing. They're aligning their efforts with those global trends and initiatives, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. They're walking the walk.
They're showing they're serious about sustainability, speaking the language investors and stakeholders understand.
Right. And that commitment to net zero carbon emissions by 2050, that's a bold statement. It's about the long game, not just next quarter's profits. It's about the future of the planet.
It's really impressive how they're making sustainability a core part of their business strategy. It's not just a side project, it's woven into everything they do.
Now, while we're talking about their broader impact, let's take another look at their community engagement work.
We touched on this before, but I'm always interested in hearing about how companies give back. What's Dialog's philosophy on community engagement?
They seem to have a very strategic and thought-out approach. They're not just throwing money at problems, they're identifying needs, figuring out how to address them in a sustainable way.
So it's about making a lasting difference, not just a quick fix. Any examples of programs they're supporting?
Sure. Their partnership with Mekasi, providing food aid, educational help, skills training to families that need it, supporting the Orang Asli communities in Pahang and Kelantan, giving them resources and training for sustainable livelihoods, beekeeping, agriculture, that kind of thing.
That's fantastic. Giving those communities the tools to become self-sufficient, build a better future. And it's not just about economic development. They're involved with environmental conservation too, right?
Right. That seagrass conservation program they have going on in Tanjung Kopak, Johor, protecting those natural resources that are so vital to the livelihoods and way of life of those coastal communities.
It's impressive how they're weaving together their business goals, their sustainability goals, and their community engagement. It's a great example of how a company can make a real difference in the world while also being successful.
Exactly. And they're not doing it alone. Partnering with local organizations, NGOs, tapping into their expertise and networks, they get that collaboration is key to making a meaningful and lasting impact.
And they're being transparent about it all, reporting on their programs in their annual report, accountability, and showcasing the good they're doing.
It shows corporate social responsibility isn't just a PR stunt for them. It's about making a real difference.
Now let's talk about the framework guiding all these efforts. Their approach to corporate governance.
Dialog seems committed to a high standard of corporate governance, following the Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance, all about transparency, accountability, ethical behavior.
But it's not just about following the rules, right? What shows us that these principles are baked into their culture?
Well, they've put in place policies and procedures to promote ethical behavior, prevent corruption. Their anti-bribery and corruption policy, for example, it's a clear zero-tolerance stance. They've even got a whistleblowing policy encouraging employees to raise concerns without fear of repercussions.
So speaking up about wrongdoing is not only allowed, it's encouraged. creating that environment of trust and accountability at all levels.
Right, and that commitment to transparency, it extends to their financial reporting too. They're giving investors clear, accurate information, even when it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
That's a sign of integrity. They're not trying to hide anything, just being honest and upfront about the challenges and successes.
Exactly, and they have a strong internal audit function, providing an independent check on how effective their corporate governance practices are.
So not just relying on self-reporting, they've got an independent watchdog keeping them honest.
Right. They're serious about transparency and accountability, and that's reflected in their reputation.
It's clear they're not just talking the talk when it comes to corporate governance. They're walking the walk, and that's a big part of their success.
Now let's talk about their growth strategy.
Okay, moving from the framework of corporate governance to their plans for expansion, achieving their long-term goals. What's their vision for the future, and how do they plan on getting there?
They want to be the leading integrated technical service provider for the energy sector, not just in Malaysia, but globally. They're aiming high.
Ambitious. How are they turning that vision into action? What's the roadmap look like?
It's a multi-pronged approach. Organic expansion, strategic acquisitions, joint ventures, they're covering all the bases.
So they're not limiting themselves. Exploring every avenue for growth, jumping on the right opportunities when they come along. Can you give me some examples of how this strategy is playing out?
Sure. We talked about their move into the sustainable and renewable space. That's a big part of their organic growth. Building new terminals for sustainable fuels, investing in hydrogen, carbon capture and storage. They're serious about clean energy.
They're putting their money where their mouth is on the future of clean energy. But it's not just about chasing the latest trend. They're focused on areas where they already have experience, where they can leverage their existing strengths.
Exactly. And they're not afraid to team up. Strategic partnerships, joint ventures, to tap into new markets, share the risk. Those joint ventures are a real testament to their collaborative approach.
They realize that working together can really accelerate growth, bring fresh perspectives to the table.
Right. Collaboration can be a powerful engine for innovation.
Now let's talk about the people making all this happen. Their employees. We talked about their commitment to well-being, but what about their broader talent management strategy? How are they attracting and keeping those top-notch people?
They seem to be taking a comprehensive and long-term approach to talent. It's about more than just offering a good salary. It's about creating a workplace where employees feel valued, respected, and supported. Investing in their development, providing opportunities for growth, fostering diversity and inclusion.
So they're tying their talent management practices directly to their overall business strategy, recognizing that their people are essential for reaching those goals, creating a workplace where everyone can succeed.
Precisely. And they're staying ahead of the curve, addressing the challenges of the future workforce, investing in programs to develop the skills that will be needed in a rapidly evolving world.
It's not just about today's jobs. It's about preparing them for the jobs of tomorrow. Very forward thinking.
Now, before we move on, I wanted to touch on their commitment to robust corporate governance again.
Good point. We've talked about it, but it's so important it's worth circling back. How are they making sure ethical behavior and accountability are ingrained in the company?
Well, they haven't just settled for meeting the requirements of the Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance. They've got this whole framework of policies and procedures, making sure they comply with all the laws and regulations.
So it's more than just checking boxes. Doing the right thing is built into how they do business.
Exactly. They've got a code of business ethics that lays it all out. They provide regular training to make sure everyone understands those principles.
It's not just about telling people what to do. It's about explaining why ethical behavior is so important, giving them the tools to make the right choices.
Right. And they've got that whistleblowing policy, encouraging employees to speak up if they see something wrong, no fear of retaliation.
Creating a safe space for people to raise concerns, that's crucial for accountability. It's about giving employees a voice, making them part of the solution.
And their internal audit function provides another layer of assurance. Independent verification that their corporate governance practices are working.
So not just relying on their own assessment, they've got an outside perspective keeping them in check.
Exactly. Transparency, accountability, it's all there. And their strong reputation in the industry reflects that.
It's clear that Dialog doesn't just talk about corporate governance, they live it. They're setting the standard for ethical behavior, and that's a major factor in their success.
Now, let's take a broader look at the context of Dialog's operations. They're working in a complex and ever-changing industry. They're operating in a really complex, dynamic industry. The energy sector is going through some huge changes, right? Climate change, new technologies popping up all the time, geopolitical shifts. It's a wild ride.
How is Dialog handling all that turbulence?
They seem to be striking a balance between practicality and, well, looking ahead. They know they need to move towards a lower carbon future, but they're also realistic. Traditional energy sources, those aren't going away overnight.
It's about finding that sweet spot, meeting today's energy needs while still getting ready for what's next.
Exactly. They're not just dumping oil and gas, they're using their knowledge and their infrastructure to help make that shift to cleaner energy happen smoothly. It keeps them competitive now while also setting them up for long-term success as the world decarbonizes.
It's just like they're building a bridge to that future, using what they're good at to create a path to a more sustainable energy system.
I like that, the bridge analogy. They're not passively waiting for the future to happen, they're actively shaping it. And they're doing it with their eyes wide open, aware of the risks and the opportunities.
Speaking of risks, we've talked about their risk management in general. But what about the specific risks that come with this whole energy transition? There's so much uncertainty. How do they deal with that?
There is. And that uncertainty, that is a risk in itself. But Dialog seems to be playing it smart, taking a careful, strategic approach. They're diversifying their energy portfolio, investing in different technologies, and they're keeping up with the latest policies, not putting all their eggs in one basket, basically.
Smart move. That way they can adapt as things change, seize new opportunities as they pop up. They're not trying to be fortune tellers. They're preparing for different scenarios.
Exactly. And they're thinking long term, not just next quarter's profits, but what about the next decade? They're making decisions now that might not pay off for years, but they know it's necessary to survive and grow in the long run.
It's a good reminder that sustainability isn't just about being eco-friendly. It's about business resilience, too, making choices that keep the company going strong for generations to come.
Now let's zoom out a bit and look at Dialog's role in the bigger picture, the Malaysian economy. They're a pretty big player in a sector that's crucial for Malaysia's growth.
That's a great point. They're not operating in isolation. They're part of something much bigger. So how are they contributing to Malaysia's economic success?
Well, they're creating jobs, bringing in revenue, attracting foreign investment. They're helping develop Malaysia's energy infrastructure, and that supports the growth of other related industries too.
They're a vital part of Malaysia's economic engine. And as they move towards cleaner energy, they're helping to put Malaysia on the map as a leader in that global clean energy space.
Exactly. They're more than just a company, they're a national asset.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into Dialog Group Berhad. Their financials, their sustainability initiatives, corporate governance, growth strategy, risk management, community engagement, their role in the Malaysian economy. We've explored it all.
It's been quite the journey.
It really has. What are your biggest takeaways? What are the key things that stand out to you about Dialog?
What really strikes me is their holistic approach to business. It's not just about chasing the highest profits, it's about taking that long-term perspective, thinking about all their stakeholders, making a real effort to be sustainable and responsible.
They're showing that you could be profitable and principled, that doing good for the world and doing well for your business, those aren't contradictory ideas. They can actually work together.
Absolutely. They're setting a high standard for corporate responsibility, proof that a company can make a positive impact on the world.
Dialog is definitely a company to watch, that's for sure. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of Dialog Group Berhad, what they do, what they stand for, their commitment to building a sustainable and prosperous future.
We hope you'll keep digging into their story, see what insights you can uncover for yourself.
As always, keep diving deep.